I was on a blog recently, and somebody was writing in a question about one of their coworkers. I want you to think about if somebody asked you how you would deal with this situation, what you would do. They said, how do you tell a fellow coworker that they talk too much? My coworker often talks to the point of having to tune them out. They give every little detail, and then they repeat themselves, and I can't get a word in edgewise, and I have to wait until they take a breath to interrupt them. I end up focusing on them taking that breath instead of listening. Help. Now, I know some of you have people come to mind when you hear that description, right? And you're like, oh, man, I get that one. So, what would you say? Would you even know? And have you ever had to have a conversation with somebody over an issue like that? Like, have you ever had somebody in your life that had really, really bad breath? And you cared, and so you had to say something. How'd that go? Or somebody whose work that they were turning in wasn't at the level that it should have been. Or they were always late, or their work was always late. We're talking about very difficult conversations, and a lot of people don't handle them very well. It was about 8 or 9 years ago that I read this book, Crucial Conversations, and it became one of my favorite books. I've read it and reread it again and again. And I loved it, and I'm going to highlight a couple of reasons why I love it. It is the best conflict resolution book that I know of. And conflict in the Bible has a significant theme. And the Bible talks a lot about how to handle conflict in a healthy way, and this is the best tool that I've ever come across on how to actually do that. Because the reality is, in the book they talk about crucial conversations. They say a conversation becomes crucial when any of these three things happen, when there's an opposing opinion, strong emotions, and the stakes are high. Ever have any of those things? Ever have any conversations with people who have a different opinion than you do? And they're very, very passionate about their opinion. And the stakes are high, right? Think about all the ways this applies. You ever have to end a relationship? How'd that go? Ever have to give your boss feedback? Some of you are like, I have to, and I haven't done it. Because you're so afraid of how that'll go, right? Ever have to critique a colleague's work? Ask a friend to repay a loan? That's a sensitive one, right? Ever have to give a negative performance review or address your teenager's attitude or behavior? Those are fun conversations, aren't they? Just such an enjoyable thing to do. So, on and on we could go with things that are crucial and very challenging to happen. So you know what happens in America? We were bad before COVID. When it came to crucial conversations, we were bad. We were not doing it. You only have three options. You don't do them, you do them poorly, or you do them good. Very few of us were doing crucial conversations pre-COVID good. We were either avoiding or we were doing them bad. Look at the statistics and what's been happening since COVID. 90% of us have felt emotionally or physically unsafe to speak our opinion at least once in the last 18 months. At least once? I'm like, once? Are you kidding me? I could list a lot more than once. And many of you know that. It's like, what in the world happened? So what did we do? Well, 65% of us just shut our mouths. And 47% of us just started avoiding the person altogether. This is what we've done. We were bad before COVID and all the circumstances surrounding it, and now we're even worse. And so crucial conversations that need to be happening aren't happening. This is what we look like. Yep, this is what's going on. The problem with that is if you can't have those conversations, you can never have the relationships and the unity that God wants you to have. And so some of you know that. You know this firsthand right now. Some of you have relationships where you used to be closer and you're further away today because those conversations aren't happening. Or they're happening poorly. And just leading to conflict. This is such an important subject. Your life will get so much better if you learn, and my life gets better as I learn about how to have healthy conflict. So we're in a series called Broken, and we're just talking about what happens when some of the things get broken in our relationships. And I want to talk to you about how to talk about and solve your problems. So please open your program, take out the notes you'll find inside, grab a pen. Welcome to those of you, of course, who are watching online. Love that you are watching. Thanks for we got a really nice letter last week. Thanks for writing. So we love to hear those things. So if you want to go to our website at PennielChurchLife.com and download the notes, you're welcome to do that. So I want to give you a heads up. Just so you know, you have realistic expectations about what's going to happen here in this message today. I am only going to talk about how to kind of create the environment for a safe conversation to happen. I'm not going to talk about the words that you actually have to say. That's next week and probably the next 2 weeks. So just be sure. I'm just talking about how do you make it so that it's safe to have the conversation. And we'll talk about what to say next week. So let's jump into this. Number one, you have to understand that dialogue is the key. This is how you have great relationships. It's how you have solved conflict. You have to have the ability to have dialogue. And I'm just going to really skim through this point because I really want to get to the next two because there's so much fun stuff to talk about today. So let me just jump down. I'm going to give you normally I don't always give you the things to fill in, but here you are. I'm giving you something so you can actually fill them in today, even if I'm not going to talk much about them. The goal, obviously, and you're smart enough to get this, is that you keep both sides talking. When both sides are talking, issues get discussed, problems get solved, pain begins to heal, and perspectives are shared. But here's the big thing. I really want you to think about in your relationships today, especially your close friends, the people in your inner circle, your spouse, your parents, your kids, are there topics that are off limits? And really give some thought to that, because if there are, then what you're saying is you need to have some crucial conversations. If there are topics that are off limits, it means that you need to have some crucial conversations. So then you need to really pay more attention to this. So watch for silence or violence. What you're going to be doing, if you're going to have healthy conflict, people, you got to learn how to watch for silence or violence. And again, I know I'm just zipping through this first one, but I really want to get through it, get to the next stuff. Silence is purposefully withholding information. So do you have anyone in your life who's really sarcastic? Sugarcoats things, avoids things, withdraws. You can see the picture, in the couple in that picture, they've pulled away from each other, right? They've gone to silence. Have you ever done that in a conflict situation where you're like, I'm done, I'm just not talking anymore. This is not helping. So silence is one way we go. And then violence isn't necessarily physical violence, although it can lead to that. It's an attempt to convince, control, or compel others to your point of view. It can use all or any of these: name-calling, threats, labeling, belittling, cutting others off, speaking in absolutes, changing subjects, overstating facts. These are all examples of verbal violence. So here's what happens. We're in a conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden one of them goes to either silence, they just stop talking and turn away. Maybe they actually physically walk away, or they go to verbal violence and they start using some of these tactics. So this is when you know the conversation just went crucial, and you have to know what to do the moment it does. Because silence and violence are both this. They're an indication that this person no longer feels safe to talk to you about this issue. If you see someone go to silence or violence, it means safety has been lost. The good news is, if you can create an environment of safety, you can talk about anything with anyone. The bad news is, most of us don't know how to create that environment of safety. And so people are going to silence and violence around us all the time. We just don't know what to do with that. And the real problem, when scared, the human brain can only process 1 or 2 thoughts at a time. Normally, we can do up to 5. So we don't hear most of what others are saying to us. So you've got to get that fear under control, or else. This is why sometimes when you're in conflict with someone, that picture of that couple sitting on the bed, away from each other, it's like, what's the most common thing you hear in a conflict situation? You're not listening to me. They can't. Their brain can't. When fear takes over, their brain can only process. Matter of fact, it's just so important to go back to that picture. Look at, they're even holding their head. You ever done that in a conflict situation? It's like, oh, it's like you're trying to will your brain to work, and it's like, I can't make it work. Well, when fear takes over, your brain won't work. And so it just won't work effectively. So you have to deal with the fear to create the safety in the relationship. So, and we're going to talk about that. And then you really have to watch out for what happens inside of you when you get stressed out. Which way do you naturally go? Some of you are silence people, and you know it. You just go towards silence. Some of you, you're the violence people, the verbal violence. Maybe you don't like the word violence, but it's just so it rhymes with silence. So don't read anything more into that. I don't think that you're beating anybody up, but it's just about verbal violence. You're aggressively going towards them. You got to know which. I'm a silence guy. Silence is my default, so verbal violence is really, really hard to get out of me. You got to know your own style, what emerges inside of you. Now, all of that to get to this one. What you have to do is you have to know how to restore safety in a relationship when you see conflict go crucial. When a conversation becomes crucial and you see either silence or violence, you have to restore safety. If only we had a modern day example we could look at. If only there was just something that happened just recently in Wisconsin. It's like, yeah. Okay, so for those of you who aren't basketball fans, you have no idea why I got this guy up here. So this is Juwan Howard, head coach of the Michigan Wolverines basketball program. And Juwan Howard had a crucial, not so much of a conversation recently with the head coach of the Wisconsin Badgers. So at the end of the game recently, the Badgers were beating his team by double digits. There was 15 seconds left. And so Greg Gard the head coach of the Badgers, put in all of his backups, and Juwan did not. He only put 3 backups and kept 2 of his starters on the floor, and with 15 seconds left, they made a bucket. And instead of, normally after a bucket's made, they drop back into the other half to play defense, they stayed in man-to-man pressure on Greg Gard's backups. And his backups didn't know what to do. They couldn't get the ball in. So Greg Gard called a timeout with 15 seconds to go. So for those of you who are just listening to this, it all just sounds like, okay, what's the big deal? Well, Juwan did not like that timeout. As a matter of fact, he started to seethe. His pilot light lit. And that anger dial spun up really fast. 15 seconds left to go in the game. Badgers finish the game, they win the game. Afterwards, you know what they do? They all line up and shake hands. At first, the head coach for Michigan won't get in the line to shake hands with Greg Gard. And then at the last second he does, and as he's walking past, he pulls his mask down and says, I'm going to remember that timeout. Greg Gard doesn't really appreciate that. So all of a sudden, the two of them, as you can see, get a little bit physical with each other, and fingers get pointed. And now this is verbal violence, okay? This is verbal violence right there on the national scene. Interestingly enough, many of you know what happened next. It turned into actual physical violence as the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines reached out and hit one of the assistant coaches in the head on purpose. I mean, it turned into physical violence. And I was watching, I had this recorded, I was watching it, we just kept rewinding it and rewinding it. Are you kidding me? What have I just seen here? This is amazing. It's like, it's lived out right in front of us. So this is what's happening all the time in our relationships around us. So the question is, why do people stop feeling safe to talk to you? Why do people stop feeling safe? So if you think about this, will really be helpful. If you can think about the last time you were trying to talk to your parents or talk to your spouse or your kids about something, and they just shut down. They just turned away from you. Why do people stop talking to you? What makes that conversation go either towards silence or they blow up and come at you? There are 2 reasons. They either feel disrespected by you, or they feel that you have some malicious purpose, some evil intent. Those are the 2 major reasons why people go to silence or violence. So in the case of Juwan Howard, he felt like Greg Gard calling that timeout was an issue of disrespect of his players on the court. There's just an unwritten rule. You don't call a timeout when you're up double digits at the end of a game. Well, there's also an unwritten rule. You don't press when you're down by 15 with the backups in, but we'll just ignore that. So it's like he felt so disrespected. And what he said in the press conference afterwards, he felt like it was disrespectful of his players. That's what he felt like. So what happens is, this is when people stop feeling safe. Remember, safety is the key. If you create a safe environment, you can talk about anything. But when safety's broken, you can't talk about anything. Silence or violence is the outcome. So when respect, so again, the first one, they feel disrespected. So again, think about Juwan Howard. When respect is lost, the conversation becomes about defending your dignity. And here's what you need to know about this. Disrespect creates highly charged emotions. You see this all the time. I mean, if you watch the news, so many of the things that are this conflict and this fight and this gunshot, it's about, well, they felt disrespected. And they don't have the emotional control to keep it from just being verbal violence. They actually turned it into physical violence. Disrespect creates highly charged emotions, and respect doesn't mean that I accept or agree with their behavior. I can respect you and not agree with every decision you make, right? You don't agree with every decision I make. We can still treat each other respectfully. But here's what I need you to lock in your mind. They are not becoming defensive because of what you are saying. They're becoming defensive because of why they think you are saying it. Does that make sense? They are not becoming defensive because of what you're saying. They're becoming defensive because of why they think you're saying it. Oh, you think I'm stupid. You think I'm lazy. You think I can't figure this out myself. You think they've got something in their head that's a message that says that you don't respect me, or you know, all those other messages. And that's why they've gone to silence or violence. Now, what do? Well, you got three options. The worst in relationships ignore what they just see with the silence or violence, and they express what's on their mind with no regard for how it's going to be received. They just keep going. They keep going. Have you ever had someone do that? It's like you're trying to stop them, and they just will not be stopped. Ever had that? It's like, that's one option, and that's super destructive because safety's been violated. Stop. Second, good, recognize safety's at risk, but do the wrong thing. They water down their content, which avoids the real problem. When I read that sentence 8 years ago, I was like, oh man, is my name right there? Because I'm pretty sure that's what I've done all my life. How many of you have ever had a conflict situation with someone and you walked away from it and they felt better and you felt worse? Thousands. I could fill books. It's been my normal operating procedure since I was a young boy. Great, you feel better and I feel terrible. I didn't even know there was this third option. You know what you need to get to is to step out of the conversation, make it safe so you can re-enter it, and then you talk without sugarcoating or pretending or faking. How many of you think that you can do that? What a challenge. That's where we need to go, right? So how do you do it? Well, again, you're watching for those emotions. When you see the emotions coming either because they've shut down and gone to silence or they've verbally blown up and gone to violence, you need to know what to do. So here are the three things you do when you see this in someone else. First, you step out of the conversation and you try and understand their perspective. You got to get curious. You just saw them go to silence. You just saw them go to verbal violence. Stop the theme, whatever you're talking about, step out of the conflict and try and figure out what's creating this inside of them. Remember what causes silence or violence? Two things. They feel disrespected, or they feel like you have some ulterior motive for wanting to say this. Some unkind motive, right? You think I'm dumb. You think I'm a failure. You think whatever, right? So you got to get into their mind. So the Bible says this: fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Have you ever encountered a fool by that definition? They don't want to actually have a conversation with you. They just want to tell you everything they think, and you should just nod and smile and say, aren't we all amazed to have you around us at all times? It's a fool. Don't be a fool. You see silence or violence, stop this, step out and say, I can see that this seems like it's really impacting. Help me understand it, right? I mean, if I was coaching the coaches, that'd be what I'd say. It would be, Greg, why do you think Juwan feels, why do you think he feels angry right now, right? It's like, get into his perspective. And it would be, Juwan, why do you think Greg didn't like that little snarky comment? What do you think he was feeling when you said that, right? It's about understanding. You got to try and understand their perspective. I doubt if they'll ever be close friends, so they may not need this, but it's still a great example. Second, apologize when appropriate. What do you need to own from this? So let's say that they feel like you were disrespectful. The honest answer you need to process in that moment is, were you? Were you disrespectful? And isn't it true that sometimes we may be? Right? Sometimes we do have another motive. And if there is, you own that. But many times there isn't. Proverbs 15:1, a kind answer is going to soothe those angry feelings. You can actually bring the anger down with the kindness, but harsh words stir them up. And then the third thing is, and such an important skill to learn in life, and one of the reasons I keep coming back to this content is I hope someday I really learn this. So sometimes, listen, I tell you honestly, sometimes the messages I do are for me and you get to listen to me preach to myself, all right? So welcome to one of those, right? So Use contrast. So when we talk about contrast, and this is all, again, everything good is from the book. So contrast is really these two words. You want to write these down on your notes somewhere? Don't and do. It's really about using those two words to fix this misunderstanding that's taken place. Don't and do. So, again, the don't addresses what they're afraid of, and it restores safety. And I'll give you some examples of this in just a minute. And then the do clarifies what your real intent is. So I don't want you to think I'm blaming you for what just happened. I know this is a complicated situation. I do want to just talk about what happened and what we can learn from it. Do you hear that? It's, oh, so you've stepped out of it. You've seen their reaction. Oh, you think I'm blaming you. Is that how you feel? Because you got curious and you asked. And they're like, yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like you're putting all of this on me. Like it's 100% my fault. And it's like, wait, I don't want you to feel blamed. I don't want you to think I'm blaming you for what just happened. That's not what I'm doing. I just want to be able to talk about it. Does that make sense? The don't and the do? I'll give you another one. I don't mean to communicate that I don't think you're smart. I think you're very smart. I just want to talk to you about what prompted you to make the decision, right? Can you imagine that one happening? I don't want you to think that I think you're smart. But I do want to talk about what just happened. Or I don't imply that I don't value your work. I just want to be able to explain this better to my boss. Now notice, I don't always use the don't and the do word. The idea is what you're after. But when you're getting started with this, actually use the don't and the do word. I don't want to say, I don't want to communicate to you that your work isn't important here. I think your work is really important. And that's why I've said these things in the past and give examples, right? And then you can step back in. And if you do this well, you can actually watch the dial get spun down. You can watch their emotions start to drain out of them. And now you can get back into the topic. Because safety was violated, you stepped out in order to understand why do they feel not safe to talk to me about this? Oh, they feel really disrespected. And then if there's something you did that you apologize, but then you say, okay, that's not what I'm trying to communicate at all. I don't mean to do this. This is all I was trying to say. And once it's safe, step back into the topic. So there's two things going on. So you've got a crucial topic to speak about with somebody, right? So you're watching them. You're watching their body language. You're watching for silence or violence. And if you see it, you're stepping out, fixing it, stepping it back in, and then stepping back in. But here's the other hardest part is this one. Keep yourself under control, right? This is the hard one when it comes to conflict. I mean, the hardest person to manage in the room is always you, right? I'm always the toughest person to manage. So we have to learn how to do this better because you're trying to manage your emotions and theirs at the same time. Look what the Bible warns you about. The Bible says, hey, watch out, a hot-tempered person, what's going to happen to your conflict? You're just going to have more and more and more. But the one who's patient, you can calm a quarrel. So if you want to have a healthy conversation and a healthy relationship, you've got to learn how to remain calm in the middle of these tough things. So again, I think about, it sounded weird to say, if I was talking to Greg Gard and Juwan Howard and to say, Greg, let's talk about this, right? Super easy here in this context to say those things. Do you know how incredibly hard it was for Greg Gard and Juwan Howard to keep it under control? I mean, it's easy to sit here right now and have this conversation. But when you're heated up, when your pilot light goes off, the next time you're in conflict with somebody and you're getting angrier, just remember what Brian said, keep yourself under control. And be like, oh, well okay, now I got it. No problem. I'll just keep myself under control. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? 3 things. First, you gotta figure out when you start feeling emotion inside of you, you gotta figure out what story did I just tell myself? You got to figure out your stories. Some of you heard me teach about this. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because it impacted me so much when I read it years ago. So here's what happens inside of you. And it happens inside of me every day. You see and hear something and you tell yourself a story. And that determines how you feel and it often leads to how you act. So Juwan Howard, he sees and hears something. What does he hear? He hears the timeout whistle. Chirp, timeout. And instantly tells himself a story. Greg Gard, Greg Gard, you're showing my guys disrespect. There's an unwritten rule. You don't call a timeout at the end of a game when you're up by double digits with 15 seconds to go. You don't do this. And tells a story. And what happens? How does Juan feel because of the story he's told? Hot, mad, angry, disrespected. And what does he do? Punches Joe Krabbenhoff in the side of the head, right? All of it is happening here. It happens in your life every day. It doesn't lead to punches, right? I hope. But it leads to emotions constantly because we are storytelling machines. And it's just instant. Your stories are your interpretation of what just happened. And here's what you need to know. Stories are instant. And they're creating emotions inside of you. And the most important thing, they are wrong all the time. We tell ourselves fictional stories all the time that make us miserable. We tell ourselves fictional stories all the time that just ruin our lives. But think about Juwan Howard. Did he have to sit there and think about, timeout whistle just blow. Wonder what story I'll tell myself about this one. No, stories just are instant in your head. And it led to instant emotion, right? He told a story and it was just that fast. And immediately felt it. So when you're feeling, the next time you're in a conversation with someone and you feel your pilot light get lit, you got to step out of that and say, what story did I just tell myself? Because you told yourself a story. And here's what I want you to understand. Emotions don't settle upon you like some mystic fog out of nowhere. No matter how comfortable it may make you feel, others don't make you mad. Some of you, that sentence just made you mad. So it's like, what do you mean others don't make me mad? My mom makes me so mad every day. My spouse makes me so mad every day. My boss makes me, no, others don't make you mad. Okay, now if that didn't make you mad, this certainly will. You make you mad. You make you scared. You make you annoyed. You make you insulted. You and only you create your emotions. Does that make sense? You get this? Some of you do not like that and you are mad now. Because like, what? How can you say that? Of course they make me mad. They make me so mad. No, it's an easy way to push all of this onto somebody else. But the story you told in your mind after that event happened, that's what made you mad or happy or sad. Because literally you can have the exact same thing happen to two people and they both have different emotional reactions. Isn't that true? Do you know that's true, right? I was reading the story of this guy who had a teenage son that was really struggling and really rebellious, and he was doing everything he could to try and help his son out. And he was talking to his coworker about this a lot, and one day he walked in and he told her, this is what happened last night. Last night, my teenage son came home, he walked in the house, and he just shouted at me, "I hate you." And the woman knows what this guy's done, knows he's a really good dad, and she was mad. Her pilot light, when she heard what the boy had said to that man, her pilot light went on right now. She's mad. But when she looked at the dad, he was smiling as he told the story. And she said, you almost seem happy. Why? And he said, I'm so happy my son was finally honest with me about how he felt, so now we can actually move forward from here. Exact same story. One leads to happiness and one leads to anger. People aren't making you mad. It's the stories that you are telling in your mind. He told a story that said, thank God, I finally have honesty with my son. Now we can move forward. And the stories you're telling are making you mad, angry, sad, happy, anxious, worried. They're what's creating the emotion. Not the actual events, because you literally can have two people in the exact same thing and have totally different emotional reactions because it's about the stories that you tell, not what you're going through. I want you to write this down. I want you to understand this. My stories create my feelings. Now, there's really good news in understanding this because that means you have some power over this. So what do? You get back to the facts. When you feel that pilot light going off and you feel worried, anxious, scared, mad, whatever you feel, you got to get back to the facts. What are the real facts of this? Your conclusions are subjective. The stories that you told are wrong all the time. So this is such an important part of my spiritual life. And again, just like I told you, this is personal therapy today. So I was so grateful to be reviewing this content. as I was prepping this last week, and I'll just put this chart back up here again. I'll show you how it works in my life, because this wasn't about a conflict situation. This was just something I found for the last few months especially, that I have this worry in the back of my mind towards this person I love pretty much all the time. And I've tried a lot of different things this year to try and turn that worry down, because it's just draining to always be worrying about this person that I love and this person I love. I can't get them out of my mind. Do you know what that feels like? It's like, this is exhausting. And so I was prepping and I saw the chart and I was working through this and I'm like, that's an emotion, worry. I wonder what the story is I'm telling about this person that I love. And so I sat down and I started thinking about all the stories. All the stories I told were doom and gloom stories. It's going to be terrible for them. Their future's going to be terrible. Nothing good will ever happen. It's like, I started looking at all these dark stories like, am I Stephen King? What the heck? Am I telling scary stories to myself? What's the point of that? I'm telling myself stories that are literally making me feel miserable every day at some point in the day. And then I thought, well, what are the facts? So I needed to go back to the facts. And so I started listing, and I actually started writing the facts. Again, this isn't a conflict situation, but I want to show you how powerful this is. So I literally wrote, and here's what I wrote: what are the facts? And since I know this person really well, I know this person is a believer. They have Jesus Christ living inside of them. And so I started writing facts about this person. This person's a child of God. God loves them more than I ever have or ever could. God is with this person right now. In the middle of these circumstances that are scaring me, God is with this person right now. And then I wrote this one: God is fully able to keep all of his promises to this person. God is fully able to keep all his promises to this person. And the more facts I wrote, the worry disappeared. And then I started just praying for him with those facts in mind. And within 24 hours, God did something huge for this person and made me go, it's like, what in the world was I spending all this time worrying about him? We tolerate these emotions because they're driven by stories that we're not even aware of. We've got to get to the stories. Now once you know the story and you counter them with the facts, you can tell a different story. And the stories that you tell determine what you experience in life and how you feel. On the back of your notes, I put down different questions at the very bottom. If you look on the back at the very bottom, there's a section called Retelling the Story. And these are questions when you're really struggling to tell a better story about someone, go through those questions. They can help you, especially in a conflict situation. I love this one. It's one of my favorite. I still use this one all the time. Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do what this person is doing? I mean, just think if Juwan Howard and Greg Gard started asking that of each other. Greg Gard, why would Juwan Howard, a reasonable, rational, and decent person, do what he's doing? And same way the other way, right? Super powerful. So let me show you how powerful it is. The author of the book, Joseph Grenny, was in church one day. And in church one day, all of a sudden he was sitting in the pew and the service had started. He heard this clicking noise behind him, in the pew right behind him. And so this clicking just kept going on and on and on. And it's like 15 minutes in the service, it didn't stop. And he's like, what is this clicking noise? He turns around. The guy behind him has obviously gotten a brand new phone. So he's got his new phone open, balanced on his knee, and on the other knee is his old phone, and he's manually typing in all the data from his old phone into his new phone during the service, not knowing that you can turn your keyboard on your phone to silent, so there's no click. And he obviously didn't know that, and he's just clicking away, click, 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 through the whole first quarter of the service, and now he turns around and he is pilot lights lit. And so he's getting angrier and angrier. He looks around to see if there's anywhere else to move in the church, but there was nowhere else to go for him and his family. So now he's just seething. And he can look around and see some people are just worshiping God. The sermon's on patience, ironically. And he's sitting there going, it's like, what the heck do I do? So then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I teach this stuff. He's like, I wonder what the stories are I'm telling in my mind about this guy behind me. So he said, I started thinking about, here are the stories. He said, I was saying, he's a self-centered jerk. He's a narcissist, only cares about himself. He's probably fully aware that he's irritating others, and he doesn't even care. Boy, wonder what emotions you're going to feel if those are the stories you're telling, right? So he caught himself, and he's like, oh my goodness. And he said, I started to challenge it with the facts. What are the facts? And what story could I be telling about this guy? And he said, I immediately started thinking about 3 or 4 times in my life where I put my needs ahead of anyone else around me. He said, it wasn't hard to come up with those stories. Times when I did the same thing that he's doing right now. He said, then I came to see him as a human being who just maybe needed some feedback, maybe just wasn't aware. I said, perhaps he's under pressure to get this done. Maybe he doesn't even know that you can turn off those clicking sounds on your phone. Some of you are like, you can? Yeah, you can. We can show you. We'll have a class. So you can turn that off. And so he said, as my story changed, guess what happened to the emotion? Guess what happened to what he was feeling? The anger, the irritation just spun back down to just low levels. So then, having taught this, he turns around in the pew, gets the guy's attention, and he says, well, I'm not telling you that. I told you, we're not going to talk about what to say to them until next week. So if you want to hear the rest of that story, you got to come back next week, because I'm not doing that. So, or just tune in if you're watching online. So we'll get into that next week, because it didn't go well. It doesn't always go well. But here's what I want you to take away from this, okay? Here's what I want you to take away from this. You have crucial conversations you need to have, right? Some of you have off-limits topics in your relationships right now. That's not okay. You need to have a conversation with someone, and you know it. So we'll talk about how to plan, what to say next week, but you need to know that when you're in those conversations, you're watching for silence or violence, right? Silence or violence means they no longer feel safe to talk to you. And you have to stop, time out, step out of that theme and get really curious. Why did you just go to silence here? Why did that create so much anger? I can see you're really angry right now. Why? Help me understand that. Get really curious. And once you understand it, if you were being disrespectful, if they're right, own it, apologize. And if they're not, then correct that with the contrast. I didn't mean to say you were stupid. I don't feel that way at all. I was just trying to communicate this. And once you've made it safe, then you get to step back in. And at the same time you're watching for their emotions, you gotta watch for yours. And you gotta make sure that your pilot light, if it gets lit, that you pause to say, what are the stories I just told myself? Because those stories are creating emotion inside of me, and you don't want to act from those stories. If you're just new to Christianity or following or watching online, conflict is such an important theme in the Bible. As a matter of fact, some of you may not understand that the reason why Jesus came was because of conflict. Jesus Christ entered into this world 2,000 years ago because conflict between humanity and God the Father. Now we're like, when did we ever pick a fight with him? I said it early in the service today. Every time you hurt another human being, you hurt God, because we are all created in his image. Every unloving word that has ever escaped your lips has hurt God. Every unloving thought, every unloving action. So the Bible says there is conflict and separation, and Jesus came to take care of that. With his death on the cross, he paid the debt that we've created so that we can be completely forgiven and put into a new, real relationship with this God. Let me have you bow your heads. Maybe for you, this is the next step in your life, is to let Jesus Christ end the conflict that exists between you and God. For some of you, this is why God feels like just a word in your vocabulary. He doesn't feel real to you. It's because you don't just get to be in a relationship with him. You have to receive this gift of forgiveness and choose to be in this relationship with him. If that's what you want, you can have it right now. Jesus did it all for you already. The debt's paid. Just say something honest like this to God in your heart. Say, God, I've been unloving. I've said and done unloving things in my lifetime without even thinking about how much that impacted you. And I'm sorry for that. Jesus, I heard that you paid for all those unloving things that I've brought into this world. Thank you for that. Please forgive me. Pay my debt today. Put an end to this conflict between you and me so I can know you better. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer, we'd love to have you tell us about it. And there is a card in your program. If you want to just take it out, there's a spot here that says, I asked Jesus to forgive me, or I renewed my commitment. Let us know. There's also a place where you can pray, put down prayer requests. Some of you, this is a big issue for you. You have some crucial conversations you know you need to have. So if you want us to pray for you, just put it down. You don't have to tell us any of the details if you don't want to. Just say, pray for a conversation, and then just put it in one of the offering boxes back on the back walls, and we have a team of people that will pray for you. So thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next week.